Okay, I'm standing here today outside number 1 Liberty Plaza in New York City with Bob McIlvaine. Bob is well known to a lot of people in the 9/11 truth movement for his amazing advocacy of truth and justice, and over many years I've watched many of Bob's interviews and videos, and it's been a great honour today to meet with you, Bob. And of course we've just been upstairs. We had a look in the family room upstairs, which is really a shrine dedicated for the family victims. I've very luckily been allowed to go in and have a look at that, and I found it an incredibly emotional experience walking around in there. And we've been talking about the whole experience with what happened to you, Bob. And in the time that we've got, I'd wonder if you could just maybe focus for us on just a little bit about your son and who he was and what happened on that day. And then I just want to talk also about how we empower other people to talk about these events in a way that will communicate. For those of us who are already aware that there is a lack of transparency and a lack of justice, how do we communicate that to the rest of the world in a way that they will finally realize that there needs to be a truly global movement and a large movement to resolve it? So maybe we could just start off with a little bit about Bobby.
Usually when I do talk, I like to talk about Bobby a little. Bobby was 26 years old. We're from the suburbs of Philadelphia, and went to Princeton University, and from Princeton University came right up to New York. And Bobby was a tremendous writer, so his goal in life was to write. But of course, you don't make any money when you write, when you're 21 years old and just coming out of school. So he first went into publishing, being a writer. He enjoyed that, and then he went into the public relations industry, and they just loved him in that because he was, I always, in fact, I'll tell kids, I used to speak in high schools and colleges, and I said, if you're a good writer, you can get a job anywhere. And he was such a phenomenal writer. He didn't have to have any expertise in anything. He could just write, and he'd do it so eloquently that people wanted to hire him. Yeah. And he came across so strong because he put it down on paper and he could speak well. So he got a job in public relations, and his only assignment was Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch loved him so much, and this is going into 2001, they loved him so much they decided they wanted to hire him just as a public relations man for Merrill Lynch, and they invited a new job for him. They gave him the assistant vice president of media relations. In essence, he didn't really have a boss or anything. He again, because of that writing, and he started work at Merrill Lynch like 3 weeks, maybe a month before 9/11. And Bobby lived up on the 66 between 1st and 2nd. Well, that day I worked at a psychiatric hospital, and that day, of course, we saw, someone called me into the TV room and said that the Trade Center had been hit. And we really weren't too worried because Merrill Lynch is directly across the street from the North Tower. But then we hadn't heard from him. Well, Bobby's normal route coming to work is where we're standing. Fulton Street would be like that way, and he goes from 66th Street, he would go up to Hunter's College, which was on 68th Street, and he'd take the subway down to Fulton Street, which is just like a block over from here. Then he would walk across the lobby at Merrill Lynch, or the Trade Tower Center, or the Plaza, then go into Merrill Lynch. Well, that day we didn't hear anything. Now, we weren't concerned because he didn't work at the towers. Well, as the day went on, of course, we never heard from him. So then we got worried, and we came up on Tuesday. And, to make a long story short, obviously we never heard from him. And that week we did find his body. And we were able to take it home on Friday. But we just had no idea what happened to him. And that's, as much as I'm involved in 9/11, I was that involved in trying to find out. I think any parent wants to know what kind of suffering. I'm getting emotional. it's very difficult to get past this point. But you want to know what happened to him. And so I've spent years doing that. And to go from that story I was talking about, Fulton Street, this is the story I have come up with. And it's the only story that I can figure out what happened to him, because currently Bobby had made the decision to go into the trade center because the Merrill Lynch was having a seminar on the 106th floor. But of course we ruled that out immediately because we had gotten his body we found out was found on Tuesday. So it was one of the first 10 bodies found or taken away. And so I just didn't understand what happened. So finally, it was, I'd say 3 years ago, I actually got in touch with the doctor who examined him that day, and he sat down and explained exactly what happened to him. And from that, doing work with New York City Ken and the Building What campaign, and talking to people like Willie Rodriguez, I talked to policemen, I talked to firemen. They all told me there was a huge explosion in the lobby. And what happened to Bobby was that he was actually from this spot walking to the North Tower. As he entered the North Tower, which would be approximately, because I know the subway gets to Fulton Street at 8:30. He might have stopped in, got a coffee, then headed and decided to go in the North Tower at the last minute. Walking in, he got hit by a huge explosion, and this is how he died. All his injuries were in the chest, face, and head, and he had no burns on him. He had post-mortem burns, but they were very slight burns, like he was laying on the beach. So my summation of all this is that he might have died before the planes hit, because I've been told by so many people there were explosions in the sublevel and in the lobby before the actual plane hit. And then, of course, I've gotten into this demolition, working with Building What campaign, that to demolish buildings like that, explosions must go off before the actual demolition takes place. So this is very important to me, because I went to every 9/11 Commission hearing. Not once did they talk about explosions, and you just can't imagine how many people I've talked to that, not mass explosions, but obviously big enough that it would knock out all the windows in the lobby, but explosions on the 23rd floor, explosions in below the towers. And so this upsets me, is the fact that my son died from an explosion. And the 9/11 Commission report we give that the fires coming down created that huge explosion. Well, I found out that's impossible. So I feel I know what happened as far as how Bobby died. That's very important to me as a parent. I don't think he felt a thing. I think it was instantaneous, because the fact that all the damage was in the front. If he certainly would have seen the plane hit, he would have been running, and of course the damage would have been in the back. So it's almost like he walked in or was walking in, and boom, just like that, he was dead. Which is good as far as I'm concerned, the fact that he didn't suffer. You know, he didn't lie in a hospital room, or, you know, laying there for 15 minutes and no one got to him, and he suffered through that. But it's upsetting to me that I know exactly how he dies, and no one in the world, as far as the 9/11 community does, but outside of that, the world doesn't even know that there was explosions in the towers. So we talk about, why is that important? Well, again, as a parent, and to people that have questioned this, there's never been an investigation. And this is my biggest problem. I went to every one of those 9/11 Commission hearings, and I walked away so frustrated, so angry, that the government, this was a cover-up. People in Max Cleland, who was on the commission, says this was a sham. Can you imagine that? My son's being murdered, and the people that are supposedly investigating this call it a sham. It's a cover-up. We can't believe these stories because people were tortured. So we've gone 9 years. My son's death and the death of so many other people has not been investigated. So right there, we got a big-time problem. And then, of course, I don't want to be called a victim, but what's happened from that time? Over 1 million people have died. Well over 1 million people in Afghanistan and Iraq. Why are we there? Because the government says that 19 Arabs, because they hate our freedoms, came and attacked us. Attacked these people, these innocent people, fine young people like my son. Well, no one knows, you know, the whole world really, if they spend 5 minutes examining this, there's a lot of falsehoods in that. So from that, because of that, we have to find the truth. People have to stop dying around the world because of what happened to my son and 3,000 other people. And this is why it is so important. And
if I could just ask, Bob, obviously I'm not handling the cold very well, I'm not very acclimatized to New York.
Yeah.
But I just want to focus on this one question which often comes up, well, not really a question so much as a criticism of people who are committed to the 9/11 truth movement. And we get it from many well-meaning people, and they basically try to tell us to move on. And you've obviously got very good reasons for why you're not going to just move on. Obviously, your son died, and you're trying to find out what happened, and you really need to know for closure, for any reconciliation to be able to take place. You need to know what actually happened. How can we bring that as a movement to the rest of humanity? Because we need to communicate the importance of this to the rest of humanity.
Well, the way I do it, and I think it's very important to me, it's a question of empathy. And I've had the rare opportunity because of 9/11. I've met people. I was down in Bogota in 2005. People from Bali, Chechnya, from all around the world. People who have suffered in Guatemala, Chile, Brazil, Israel, Palestine. I've met parents from Palestine. I've met parents from Israel. And I have a profound empathy. And and it's tough to have empathy if you've never suffered it before. Because, you just... To envision a child... I envision my son every day. That he died, it's a blast. He had a blast. It was a horrendous death, although he didn't feel anything. But to talk to a woman in Israel that her daughter died in a blast in a restaurant. The girl was there for breakfast, and a blast kills her. Well, think of yourself. What's that body look like? I do that every day. A Palestinian girl, her three brothers were killed when Israeli soldiers came in and just murdered them. Then I meet people from Guatemala. A mother tells me her two daughters, because they had a little leftist, what they call leftist feelings about something, they were taken away from her. So every day, it's almost like it's for the victims of the world that I do this. But if you can bring that to people, because of 9/11, it's just all on paper right now, but I can envision those deaths. And I met a family, a woman who lost 9 kids in Afghanistan because of an errant bomb. Well, how can we have this in life? Everybody should be talking about it all the time, that innocent civilians are constantly dying. Yet, why? Because of 9/11. Yet, do we have the truth about 9/11? No, we haven't even come close to it.
Yeah.
And they've admitted this. So I don't know what the answer is. It's frustrating. It's emotional. And to me, for me, I can keep doing it because of empathy. Because I can think of my son, but I've been to Japan to talk to people that were in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and envisioning all those little children burning up, and they run into the river at Ground Zero in Japan. Well, that's mind-boggling, and I don't want to give that up. But people don't want to go there. But that should drive people, that what an innocent child dying looks like. And that's what bombs and wars do. It's so, I don't want to see soldiers die, but the fact is that these people are dying, and this is throughout history. And we had that opportunity with 9/11 to say, hey, time out. Governments do things like this. We have to take control of these governments. We can't allow these things to happen. And that's why, again, truth is so important, because we've never gotten it.
I just want to say thank you so much for today. Thanks for your great help and taking me into the family room. Really appreciated that. And we in Australia who are working in the truth movement are working really hard to just continually bring the facts to light.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Bob.